Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Eric. I'm the account manager at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. We are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges by the creative use of technology. For those of you that haven't attended a webinar session with us before, Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand facilitate training of a number of online webinars, workshops, boot camps, and webcons to help the social sector upskill in the digital area. Today, I'm really excited to welcome you to join today's webinar, which is Scale Your Impact, Automation and Personalization, which is being presented by Saoirse Rochford, the Senior Director of Partnerships at Nation Builder. She manages customer relationships and strategic partnerships for a host of the most influential political, brand, and non-profit organizations around the globe. She's a political strategy leader committed to building community in an effort to develop more effective leaders from all walks of life. Prior to joining Nation Builder, Saoirse worked as a senior associate of the Dewey Square Group, where she developed and managed grassroots organizations for a variety of candidates, ballot initiatives, businesses, and nonprofits. Saoirse has also served as a political advisor on a number of federal, state, and municipal campaigns across New England. Now, before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping from myself. All the lines are going to be muted, so if you've got any questions or technical issues, just chuck that in the questions box. If it's a technical issue, I'll do my best to help troubleshoot that with you online. Otherwise, if it's a question, we'll be pausing for questions throughout the webinar, and I'll flag those with Saoirse as we go along. We do encourage you to ask as many questions as you'd like. If you've got any questions, just ask it. There are no silly questions here. It's a safe space. Just note that your questions aren't going to appear to the entire group, though. They'll just appear with me first. So don't worry about that. Now, if you are on a Wi-Fi connection today, if you can, just shut down any other programs that you might not be using, just because that can sometimes interfere with the quality of the audio and the video that you might be seeing. That's a really common issue, unfortunately. Now, for those of you that are wondering, this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording and the slides. That should be going out tomorrow, so keep an eye out for an email from myself on that later. Otherwise, that is it from me. I will hand it over to Saoirse now. Thanks, Saoirse.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm really excited to be with you all today. And so let's dive right in. So we are going to talk about how to scale your impact using automations and personalizations. Today we'll be focused predominantly on Nation Builder software, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the thematics in general that we discuss. So like was stated there, please pop those in the chat as we go throughout. So what is Nation Builder? We build software that builds movements, but what does that actually mean? We've got 4 core components to our platform, and up first is our dynamic CRM. This is where you are able to store all of your donors, all of your supporters, all of your volunteers. Then we have our communication suite, which is really what we're going to be focusing on today. And so this is where you can communicate with your audience through email and through texting. We then have our content management system, and this is where you can build out any website pages that you need, donation pages, volunteer pages, peer-to-peer pages, so think personal fundraising pages, volunteer event, petition, you name it. And then last but definitely not least is our fundraising suite. And so we do have a payment processor built in-house, as well as kind of all of the tools that you would need for grant management, for small dollar fundraising, for peer-to-peer fundraising, all of that lives. The power of Nation Builder software comes from the integrated platform. And so that really is the key when we think about these 4 core pillars. Up next, I want to walk you through the concept of our product principle. In the same vein that we have 4 product pillars, we have 4 product principles. And the first is this construct of owning your own data. At this moment in time, it is so important to own your own data. And what I mean by this is to actually own the relationship with your data. And so if you don't have a CRM yet, please think about getting a CRM so that you can actually have ownership of the data. When we think about it in the context of Nation Builder, it is your data is yours. You can access it, build into it, and take it with you at any time, which is pretty rare and a thing that I think is very important for folks to know when they are thinking about a CRM to manage their email program in particular, wanting to be able to own that full holistic history. Putting people at the center. And so this is all about being able to find your people, to personalize your outreach. And we've got features that are built and designed to automatically make this a part of your flow. Up next, we have this concept of moving people to action. So when I'm talking about moving to people to action, what I want you to be thinking about is, how do I actually get a supporter to be a leader, to be a donor, to be a fundraiser, right? The ladder of engagement. That is what we are talking about. We're talking about moving people to action. And then last but definitely not least is the distribution of leadership. And this is at the core of kind of every area and every feature within our product, because ultimately what we want the software to do is enhance the ability to distribute your supporters, like engagement really with your organization, to recruit more people, to donate more on your behalf. So that's the kind of core crux of Nation Builder. Just some of the wonderful folks that we work with across Australia and New Zealand highlighted here. Excuse me. If you've got any questions on that, would be more than happy to talk through. So what we're going to cover today, we are going to talk about automations. How do you actually automate your email program? We're going to go into some email best practices. Then we're going to get inspired. We're going to think about some use cases. How do you actually use automation in your programs, whether that be membership recruitment, donor recruitment, increase in donation amount. So we'll really get into that. And then just some tips really before you actually get started into that. So up first is why use them? Why would you use automations? So up first is this concept of saving time. There is real strength, right? And that is going to help you when you're thinking about, how am I planning these multiple campaigns that I'm going to be running? In reality, you will likely already have some of these emails and some of these, the content that you want to think about in an automation going. And it's all about putting those together to make a kind of consistent flow and save you time in the long run. Building stronger relationships. Email series will allow you to streamline your process and make sure that your supporters actually have a good experience with you. You can progressively send them information about your organization and make progressive asks to build trust over time. The last thing you want is not being able to ask for a donation because they've just started in your organization, right? You want to build that relationship and build a trust with them. And lastly is to measure success. So we have a concept in Nation Builder called conversions. And if you are using other email tools, I'm sure they have similar constructs. And so what this does, it allows you to actually convert people out of an automation based on the call to action that you're having them take. So for example, if you have an email automation where your first introduction email is about your organization, your second is to RSVP for an event, your third is to have them volunteer. If someone RSVPs for that event, you can have them converted, right? So you're tracking and measuring your success based on how your content is going, ultimately freeing up your time to actually do those one-on-one engagements that you need to do. So what are they? It is a series of email with a set time delays between each email. You can then contract conversions throughout the series.
I found this on the web.
You can also decide to have people exit your automation at the conversion. So this is just kind of a simple map to outline what it actually looks like to create an automation. So in here, you can see there are two types of automations that we orient around. That's list source. This is for anyone who is in a fixed audience. So thinking about the different types of automations you can run. When you're thinking about a fixed audience automation, this is definitely for something more akin to people that have already donated to your organization that you would want to have them maybe increase their donations. You've got a fixed audience of people that you know you're working with. The other type of automation to think about here is page source. A page source automation is going to be dynamic. It's going to be at the moment at which they interact with that particular web page. And this is really powerful and massively time saving for your organization as you're starting to build out more and more programs. So how do you measure your success? So we talked about this briefly, but just want to show you what this looks like. And so being able to really get a clear understanding, as you can see here on the right-hand side, what this email series is about. It's the welcome series. And on the left-hand side, you can see here that we've identified our conversion. being able to get a clear picture for what your conversion rate is going to just ultimately allow your team to have more effort in other places that it needs it, right? You're being able to see here that your language is actually converting at a 54% rate. You can go in, make easy tweaks to different email copies. It's a really powerful way for you to be able to actually assess the health of your email program or overall. And so with that said, I want to dive into email best practices. And this is kind of a big area. A lot of our customers, a lot of our partners at the moment are struggling with some changes that are going on in the email service provider world, ESPs, and it is a really important facet to any email program. And so let's kick off with some of the most common practices. And so how do you send great emails, right? Traditionally, this is what people think makes a good email program. Right message plus right person plus right time equals successful email program. But there's actually a lot more to it than that. And so what is that, right? Getting it delivered, getting it opened, and ultimately getting it engaged with. And so when we think about getting it delivered, what we're actually talking about here is domain reputation. And if you have, let's say you have a, excuse me, you have a domain that is ilovepuppies.com, and that domain has maybe got a bad reputation, or maybe it wasn't authenticated properly when you set up your first email sending tool, that's going to impact your ability to actually get it delivered. And so email is really connected to your domain reputation and your domain authentication. The other piece that's really important here is your audience. Please, please, please do not purchase lists. Do not purchase data. It's going to hurt you in the long run. And we really, really want to recommend to folks that you're building it organically. You're using recruiter and referral programs so that your list is growing organically as opposed to any purchasing. Your sending frequency. If you are a sporadic sender, so if you send maybe every other month, you're going to have a harder time getting delivered because you are not you don't have a consistent flow. And so making sure that you have some consistency with your sending is really key in actually getting delivered into an inbox. Some other things to think about here, and this is all in the content realm, spammy words. Avoid all caps. When you're thinking about image to text ratio, you want to be in the 80 to 20, 80% text, 20% image ratio. Fonts are another one that come up when ISPs, internet service providers, or ESPs, email service providers, release their reports at the end of each year on what is a healthy deliverability program. And fonts are a key part of it when it comes to how the email service provider is actually reading your email. Now we're moving into getting it opened. And so when you're thinking about actually getting an email opened, you are competing with thousands and thousands of other emails, right? Think about your own inbox. Think about outside of causes that people care about, outside of politicians that they care about. They're also getting e-commerce emails. They're also getting emails from friends and family. And so it's a very crowded space to actually get content opened. Your subject line and your sender, that is the entry point. If you think about it from like a storefront version, it's the shop window, right? It's the way that people can connect with you. And so you want to make that as personal as possible, right? It is really important that there is some type of personalization in your subject line that's going to increase engagement right out of the gate. You're just going to see a higher ROI on emails that have personalization in the subject line. We've tested it like years and years here at Nation Builder, and we've seen it kind of 70% basically increase in open rates from those who do not have personalization within their subject lines. The other thing you want to think about here is the sender. Some tools out there will have the ability to do A/B testing. It is something that we have here at Nation Builder, and you can A/B test both on the subject line and the sender itself. And so different audiences are going to react differently to different sender names. And so I always recommend when you're starting an email program or you're kicking off a new content stream, that you test this out. You do some A/B testing and you can identify if your audience engages better with a name versus an organization, as an example. So you could do, Saoirse Rochford just as the name, You could do Social Rochford head of partnerships. You could just do the nation builder team, right? Test that out. Make sure that you are just seeing what lands basically with your folks. And then lastly, in getting it opened is all about targeting. And so when we are thinking about a good email program, it is all in who the email is for. If you're writing an email and someone on your team says, well, it should just go to everyone, that is vanity metrics. You need to stay away from vanity metrics. You want to be looking at less about I've sent it to 100,000 people and more about, maybe you've sent it to 1,000, maybe only 100 people. But I bet you if you're sending it targeted, not I bet you, I have the data to show it. If you're sending targeted emails, you are having a higher ROI on what those emails are actually asking for, and always a higher open rate. And so an example of targeted emails, like hyper targeted emails, is looking at engagement history. So for example, you might run a filter to identify every single person that lives in Sydney. Of those people that live in Sydney, you want people that have attended 3 events and have volunteered with you. That's going to take your audience down, right? That's going to be a much tighter and targeted audience, and that's intentional. And so when you are writing your email now, you're able to actually add specific personalization to each individual within that audience by the fact that you've now catered the message to such a tight audience. And lastly, here we have getting it engaged with. And so this is all about, okay, we've got them into the inbox, we've gotten it opened. Now, what do we want them to do? You always want to have an ask in your email. And that ask can be have a friend sign up for our newsletter, donate to our organization, volunteer, host an event, attend an event, become a fundraiser, you name it. That call to action is going to vary across program, across email, but always have an ask. You want to personalize that ask based on previous engagement. So for example, if you are asking someone to RSVP for an event, you want to dynamically reflect that they have attended events previously. So it might say something like, thank you for attending the last X number of events that they've attended. We would love for you to join us at this event. Again, the data shows that the more personalized your emails are, the more likely you are to get engaged with. And lastly, always have a follow-up plan. That's where automation really comes in key here, because when you're thinking about the first email you're going to send, you should also be thinking about the next 3, the next 4, and they should be dynamic based on how people respond and engage with the calls to action that you had in the first and the second and the third email. And so you have to have that follow-up plan in place. Okay. Any questions from the audience before I move into some of these get inspired use cases?
We don't have any questions yet, but yes, now's a great opportunity to ask some, but if not, there'll be another break coming up, I'm sure, to ask them.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Well, we will jump in to use cases. Okay. So what I've done here is I've kind of prepared a whole list of examples that I hope will inspire you to think about your email program and your email series. And I'm going to talk through the benefits of them, how you can actually create them, and then would really love to hear from some of you. So here we are seeing a traditional welcome series. What are the benefits of that? Right? The benefits that you have here are to warm up an email list. These folks may not know who you are. Maybe they joined from a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad that you ran. And so this is about warming up this list. You can also, in a welcome series, show supporters a menu of different ways that they can engage with you. So if you have a number of different events that come up, or there's different causes that you are supporting or petitions you want folks to sign, this gives you a really nice opportunity to really introduce people to your organization. And lastly here is to branch out depending on the action people are taking. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see the flow of what this email series would look like. You're going to start with everyone who has taken an action on a particular page. Then you're going to send them an auto response. 1 day later, they'll get a thank you from the CEO. And then 3 days later, they will get information on how they can actually get involved. And then 3 days after that, they are going to get a prompt to become a member, right? When you think about the conversion piece that I talked about at the top, this is where you're being able to actually evaluate the health of your welcome series and ultimately change content if it's not doing as well as you would like it to. So that's the welcome series. It doesn't have to be super cumbersome. Think about what it is that you already have running, what auto responses you already have going out. And I bet you can get yourself a welcome series much quicker than you would think. Volunteer activation is another one of my favorites when we think about how people can use email automation to really encourage people to participate in your program. And so here, the benefits of these types of email series are to onboard new volunteers. This is a great way if you have an event, let's say you have a large event and you ask for volunteer recruits there and you get a large number of folks coming through. It's quite a hard process to manually go through and actually onboard those folks. And this concept of an email series here really can help you remove that manual work and free up your team just by having it preset. You can also educate folks on this with activities and give them guidance on how to actually volunteer for your organization. I know with a couple of different nonprofits that I've worked with over the year, predominantly in the childhood education space, it's really important for some nonprofits to have some pretty strict guidelines on how you show up and how you represent the nonprofit as a volunteer. And so this is also a great use case for an email automation. And then lastly is to increase the likelihood for them to actually sign up for a volunteer shift. I'm sure I do not just speak for myself here, but the amount of times where I have had volunteers sign up on a website and then not follow through, this is a great way to get them to actually convert, right? So if we think about that conversion rule, we are getting them to convert because they're committing to a shift. So giving them an actual time that they would be volunteering. It's a key thing to do to actually get your volunteers scheduled and make sure that they feel equipped. They're more likely to turn out for the volunteer activity you need. An event series. So this is a great way to kind of get people energized, get them really excited about going to an event. And so, benefits of this, keeping your folks reminded about when the event is coming up. You can set that. Those will be time related depending on when your event is and when they've signed up. Increasing turnout. So we have actually seen that folks who use automations for events, both virtual and in-person events, they have seen a 13% increase in their turnout rate than those who send just one email when someone RSVPs off right out the gate. The other thing that I've seen work really successful here is recruiting volunteers for the event through a workflow. This is going to be really dependent on the types of event you host, but just another thing to think about here as an option for how to use it. And then the last one's actually one of my favorite, and this is kind of like if you've got a special guest speaker coming to an event or someone that's really going to kind of like percolate ideas and get folks excited. This is a great way to kind of trickle out slow information to keep people really active and engaged with the content you're delivering in the event that you have. So that's just a good top tip if you have one of those types of events coming up. One time to reoccurring donors. So everyone knows reoccurring donors are the kind of creme de la creme of donations, whether you're in the nonprofit space, in the advocacy space, in the political space, because what it allows for you to do is predictability, right? You're actually able to map out what you can spend and the frequency that you can spend. And so this is giving you kind of the optionality to take one-time donors into recurring donors. It's really, really important that you are taking them on this journey, and it's really detailed. And so here you can see on the right hand side the flow. So we want to send an auto response, we want to thank them, and also correlate their donation to an impact. That's a really important piece of donation, one time to reoccurring is that correlation. If they can understand the impact that their $10 have in a one time, and then if you can, give an actual line for line, if you donate $10 a month, then you can have X impact. That's a massive way to increase. And again, this all needs to be dynamic. So if Sorcia's donating $10, great. If Mary's donating 25, it would appear as 25. So when we're thinking again about personalization, this is all has to be kind of tied. So you need personalization as well as that automation. And so obviously here the conversion would be to go from a donor to a monthly donor. I've got a couple more for you here. Lapsed member win back. This one is great if you have a membership program and you want to get folks who have maybe, you know, dropped off over the last couple of years back in to re-engage with you. There are going to be a number of different ways that you need to re-engage members. Phone banking is always really, really key when you think about member re-engagement. And so this would be one way. I would highly, highly recommend that you would have multiple streams of re-engagement going at the same time. Re-engagement series to non-openers. So this one is important, and I've actually coached a number of clients over the years through re-engagement series, and this is all about people who are on your email list but they just aren't opening for whatever reason it is. And so ideally, you as an organization should have what is called a sunset policy. For those of you who may not know what that means, that is where you have a regular cadence at which you do a re-engagement campaign and then you sunset or opt out the people who haven't engaged, and you give them a heads up that you're doing that. That's going to give you a fresh list. It's going to help you maintain a really good and strong deliverability. And the key here, right, is inactive recipients on your email list need attention too. Those folks who are not opening is ineffective to your organization and ultimately hurts you in the long run. And so being able to identify inactive recipients is key. And taking them on a kind of a last ditch effort to get them re-engaged in your audience is going to pay off in the long run. The other thing to think about here is list decay happens. People switch jobs, they no longer have access to that email. And so ultimately what we saw, and on average in 2021, 22.5% of a given email list expires over the course of a year, right? 22.5%. And so by having a combination of these types of re-engagement series, as well as a sunset sunset policy and acquisitions, you're going to be able to maintain a healthy list, which gives you the higher likelihood to have increased open and engagement rates. Okay. So some tips before you get started. So, you know, we just went through a whole list of examples there, and you will all get access to this deck and the recording, but I want to take you through the concept of personalization. And I'm doing this with Nation Builder software here. And so what you can see on the right-hand side is the example of the actual data that is going to pull in to make this email personal to every single individual recipient. So in this example, I am using a if-else variable or an if loop, right? Some of you may understand that concept of an if, but what that's actually scoping to, right, is where you can see it says if tag list contains RSVP London launch Jan 2022, then read this language and show this red button. Else, read this language and show the green button. End if. So everything that is before the blue, where it says the if, that's going to be for everyone. And everything after the end if is also going to be for everyone. But this email is dynamically changing its content based on the criteria that your audience has. So if everyone in your audience, or 50% of your audience has the London launch January 2020 event tag, they will receive that top section. What you're seeing here is that I'm logged in as Nation Builder on the left-hand side. And so my email is actually reading further to our recent email regarding the forthcoming London launch event. We wanted to follow up, right? So I am getting that second set of content. This is really, really important to do when you are creating email series or single emails. Like I said at the top here, excuse me, what we have seen over the years, over and over again, is that if emails are not personalized, they will continue to go unread and disengaged with. If they are personalized, both in the subject line and the body of the email, you are just going to see 10x results in how people are engaging in your content. Okay, so thinking about creating a custom email series, right? This is really this is pretty detailed, and I'm taking you through an event invitation workflow. So for example, you want to have some logic, right? So you want to be able to branch out your emails depending on how people are interacting with your content. And so up first, we're sending out the initial invitation. That's going out to everyone who we think would be a good fit, right? A potential RSVP for our email. If they RSVP'd, we want to thank them for signing up, and then we want to ask them to donate. Before we do that, though, we're going to wait 1 week. So we're giving them some time to adjust, and maybe in that same time period, they would actually join one of our other automations. Then we're going to wait 1 more week. And if they RSVP'd and donated, they are getting a thank you for donating, and we are sharing an event link with their friends. We're asking them to do that. If they have RSVP'd and not donated, they will get a thanks for signing up, not for donating, and they will be prompted to share the event link with their friends. So that's all on the left-hand side, right? So that's the journey that we are taking people on if they RSVP, if they donate, and then if they RSVP but don't donate. If they don't RSVP, we're going to follow up and we're going to ask them, can they make it to the event? That has then got its 2 branches. One of those is the same as the if RSVP'd not donated branch. So again, thanking them for signing up and asking them to share the event with their friends. But if they haven't RSVP'd, we're going to do a 3rd email, and we are going to give them an option here to donate if they can't make it. And so this is a completely bespoke kind of flow of how you would create and think about your custom email series. Please feel free when you get the deck to use this for your own mock-up. You really can create a kind of as many branches as you want to think about, and it's all done through the liquid logic that we just saw in the previous slide. Okay, so mapping out your email series. What are your most important goals? I want you to think about that. Just like take a second, think through, okay, if I'm sending out an email, what do I want people to do? How is it then that your emails would actually help you reach those goals? You really need to think about the overall goal of your supporter's journey. Once you have that, you can start to map how the email series are going to actually help you contribute to those goals. How are they going to work together? What if you have 10, 15, 20 different email series that are running at the same time? If that is the case, then you're a pretty complex organization, and heck yeah, because you're getting people really engaged. But you have to plan the supporter journey so that you can identify where they're going to be at any given moment in their cycle with your organization. So here you can see an example supporter journey. This is pretty basic, but it does cover the key components of all of the nonprofits that I've worked with over the years. So joining, sending them on that welcome series email, then having a variable email, that is your email donation. That's then going to take them on that one time to reoccurring donor drip. Your second email there is your volunteer, which is going to take them on that volunteer activation. And your third is your event RSVP, which is going to take them on that event get excited series that we talked about. And so this is just one example. And like I said, feel free to use this as a template as you start to map out what an email series could look like for you. The last thing here before I wrap it out is to plan, review, and improve after you've set this live. just because you have created the email series does not mean the work is done. We talked about A/B testing earlier, but you should constantly be iterating on what your campaign language is, how people are responding to it, how they're engaging with the content overall. And you need to look at the data to see how that is going. Here you can see these are really low numbers. This is just our kind of testing and dummy nation here at Nation Builder. But, we've got 66%, we've got 33% in clicked. Those are really high engagement numbers. And when we see the average across our nonprofit customers here at Nation Builder, we're seeing kind of anywhere between a 21 and a 30% open rate as like really, really good. Anywhere between kind of the 14 and 19% open rate as pretty good, and so on. And then on the click-through rates, we're seeing much lower. And so anywhere between kind of 3 and 5% on your click-through rate is kind of not very, I would say good. And we've got, a couple of outliers that are in the 10 to 15% click-through rate. So don't be too, discouraged if you're not seeing people immediately engage with click-through rates. But what that would indicate for me is that you want to go in and do some message testing and make sure that you are personalizing that content to give yourself kind of the best opportunity for folks to engage with your content. Okay. Well, that is it from me. As you all know, as Connecting Up members, you do have a wonderful discount with Nation Builder. So I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but I'm sure that will be in the follow-up email. And you can always reach out to me. I think you all have my contact information at this point. I want to say this is like number 6 webinar for the year. Always a great engagement with you all. So yeah, please jump in with some questions. Happy to kind of get in the weeds as is helpful.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Sorsha. I'll just wait for questions to come through here. We haven't got any yet, but we'll give people a couple minutes to get their thoughts together and type some in if they've got them. I've actually got a question myself, having watched that.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, knowing obviously you work with a number of not-for-profits, are there other examples of, I guess, successful email campaigns or automations beyond, say, like a welcome journey that you might suggest people investigate for their own not-for-profit?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And so let me we go back. So yeah, so these were all the different types. So obviously that's your welcome series.
Welcome series. Yep.
Volunteer activation is a really good one to take folks through. The event getting excited series, one time to reoccurring though is my absolute favorite. Like truly taking someone on that journey from being a one-time donor to a reoccurring donor. And I've seen a lot of great success with that. The other one that's very powerful is that lapsed member win back. And like member is, I think, a pretty isolating language, but how, if you have memberships, then great, this is a thing to implement. But if you don't have memberships, how I have implemented this with customers that don't have memberships is basically creating, like, just using the language of, you're our founding donors, or you're the first people to ever come to an event of ours. And so basically creating a like collective group and making them feel a part of a community in a way. And you can treat that as the concept here of like a lapsed member so that you can make the call to action. But it really is all about actually just making folks feel like they're really a part of a community when you think about this lapsed member win back.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah.
Still waiting for any other questions. I guess, are there any other final comments that you might make around tips or best practice? I mean, I know obviously that was sort of all about what this webinar was, but yeah, I guess just anything else that you can think of off the top of your head that I guess might just help people think more about this as they absorb all of this information and take it in.
Yeah, I think the thing that's not sexy about this is email deliverability. And I know we don't really dig in that much in this, but I believe I've done an email deliverability one for y'all in the past. It's so important. you can have the best language in the world, but if you do not have a good email domain and IP reputation, you're not even going to get into people's inboxes. And so if you don't know what your email deliverability is, or you don't know what your inbox placement is, reach out to your email provider, your technology provider, so you can start that conversation with them. There's so many tactics, and it's really unique depending on the situation. So one example is for, let's say if you are using an email provider that uses a shared IP pool, your reputation is tied to the IP address that you are sending from. And if they're using a shared IP pool and they're not managing that shared IP pool to your best interests, then you could potentially be in a pool with bad senders, right? So your domain reputation is impacted by the people who are sharing the IP address with you in the pool. It's very common practice for organizations, for vendors to use shared IP pools as a construct. And so just equip yourself with the language and the knowledge. There's so much free information out there on how to achieve good email deliverability, but ask those questions of your vendors, be in that conversation. If you have a bad domain reputation, look at getting a subdomain. For example, I gave the ilovepuppies.com example. If I had a bad domain reputation there, I would think about, action.ilovepuppies.com. That's the example of a subdomain. So you've still got your root domain, so you're not losing brand awareness and engagement, but you're able to change the sub, right? So you're swapping out the sub, which you would have increased or improved deliverability with. And then lastly in this is actually doing email warm-ups. Welcome series are great for a number of reasons, but they're really good for IP and email warm-ups. And so you would need to do an email warm-up if you change providers. So if you changed email vendor, where you were maybe sending with MailChimp and then you moved to NationBuilder, or you're sending with NationBuilder and you move to Drupal or something, that's when you would need to do a warm-up. And welcome series are really, really good for that, because you're sending at a regular cadence. And that's really important in the early stages of warming up your IP and domain reputation. And so, yeah, but a little bit nerdy, but it's really, really important. It's like the foundation to a good program. And so I'm also happy to chat more about that if folks are interested. But I think I've definitely done a webinar on that before for this group.
Oh, fantastic. No, that's very helpful. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
All right, well, it's not looking like we've got anybody with questions at this point in time. That being said, yeah, maybe we call it a little bit early and give everyone a little bit of their time back. But as you mentioned, Saoirse, obviously, if there's any questions offline, they can contact you. I know you've said you've provided your details before. If anyone attending this webinar hasn't got them, if you want to just email the events@connectingup.org inbox, feel free to pass your questions on to us and we can make sure they get passed along to Saoirse as well. So that's not a problem at all. Otherwise, yes, as mentioned at the start of the webinar, the recording and slide deck will be made available to you all. That should be going up tomorrow. So again, keep an eye out for an email from myself. I'll have links through to all of that information for you. But yes, look, thanks very much, Saoirse, for presenting today. It's wonderful to have you as always. Thanks everyone for coming along. Saoirse, is there anything you'd like to say at the end here?
Just thank you very much for having me and everyone for joining. I always enjoy it with the Connecting Up team.
Fantastic. Thanks, Saoirse. Well, thanks, everyone. I will give you back 15 minutes of your day. Have a great one, and we hope to see you all at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.